So welcome to the Spotlight on Norway. In this session, we're going to deep dive into delivering a multi-tenant Azure platform with a single deployment. My name is Olinske, Cloud Solution Architect with Microsoft Norway. I'm here to introduce two people that I've had the pleasure to work with in the last year. So Matthew and Aaron, you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. So my name is Matthew Greenham. I'm the leader for Team Azure in Privatelink Utvikling.
My name is Erhan, and I'm the Azure platform developer for Privatelink Utvikling.
Matthew, can you tell us about SpareBank 1 Alliance?
I certainly can. So we work for Privatelink Utvikling, which is one company together with 40 plus others, together with 13 banks that makes up the Privatelink Alliance. There's about 9,000 people working across the alliance and 650 in Privatelink Utvikling. We deliver various shared services to our internal customers. I mean the banks and the companies there, and a large part of what we do is IT support, IT services. So that's operations, IT architecture, security, platform design and operations, and pure software development as well. So we have a very long and an illustrious tradition of innovation in Privatelink in the whole alliance, and whether this is to provide solutions to our customers or internal systems, we are often very early to market with technical innovations and provide good solutions. So when we're talking about our bank customers, we had the first net bank in Norway. We had the first and still the best mobile bank in Norway. But again, internally, they're just as important when we have systems and platforms to support the wider business. So we had an on-premise container platform a long time before the cloud was an option. And we have still today probably Europe's most complex exchange hybrid environment as well. And all these systems are supported and created and designed by Privatelink Utvikling and the highly skilled people we have there. So we see this Azure platform as the latest delivery we have. It's using modern development tools, modern development methods, and this fits in with our long tradition. We innovate. It's in our DNA. It's in our culture. This is what we do and who we are.
Perfect. So I also want to let the viewers know over there as well to feel free to ask any questions at the end of this session or during the session, and we'll get back to them at the end of the session. So like most organizations, this isn't SpareBank 1's first rodeo. So let me ask you guys, how did the journey start and what made you guys revamp your approach in Azure?
Yes, we started this journey to the Microsoft Cloud in about 2017. We ran a project called Zeus, after the Greek god. And the plan was to elevate the whole alliance up to the cloud. It was a success in its time. We synchronized all the users out to their respective tenants and created an Azure cloud platform. But I think at that point, when we transitioned over to operations, we went into a few of the pitfalls that are very common, I think, for most organizations. I don't think we were mature enough to understand how much effort was required to understand the input of new ways of doing things and financial backing to achieve these things either. So we went in slightly off on the wrong foot there, but I think in hindsight, we can also see there were quite a lot of problems with the technical platform as well.
Absolutely.
We can talk about that.
I can mention some of the disadvantages that we had with the old platform. So first of all, there was no particular vision or any desired goal to our platform, and it was created with best effort back in 2017, and it hasn't been changed ever since. So the way we deployed the platform was that we had to run all the scripts manually, which is a really time-consuming process because we have to do all sorts of changes and modifications within the scripts and templates to adjust them according to the bank we were deploying to. And another thing that was we weren't following any policy-driven governance model with the old platform, as we do now. With the old platform, we had around 11 policies, and for the new platform, we have over 400 policies. This is basically eliminating quite a amount of work that we don't need to do, where we are assigning policies to do instead. And another thing was that the management group hierarchy and the naming convention, we couldn't reuse that because of the way we designed it. The management group hierarchy was very designed in a bank-specific way, where we branch them out according to the banks. And the naming convention, we are today programmatically creating all of our resources, so we couldn't use that with the old standard we had. And lastly, I want to mention that we weren't following any zero trust or any least privilege process with the old platform. As for today, we are using PIM for just-in-time access, and the old platform, we're just assigning all the roles directly to the resource groups and to the subscriptions, which isn't a practice that we wanted to follow.
Yeah, so as you can hear, we had a few issues with the platform that we always wanted to address. And in 2021, with yourself, Zach, and Nico van Diemen, so hi, Nico, we ran a series of assessments to find out where we were and what we could do. And we soon found out that it was better just to build a new platform and start again instead of focusing on the old one. So that's what we've done the last year or so. We've been working to establish this new platform of ours. And in August, we went in production with our new platform, Eunomia. And this has been so far a very good success. And we're looking forward to taking it even further into the future.
So what were the list of requirements that you guys had?
Yeah, we surely had some requirements, and we wanted to create a platform that was mostly based on Microsoft best practices by following the cloud adoption framework and the Azure landing zone architecture. And the reason for that is because it's well documented. It provides us with great guidelines and samples on how to organize a platform like this. And as you can see with this picture here, these are the 8 design areas for Azure landing zone. And this is basically covering everything within our platform. And our pipelines are also reflecting that, so we can easily do adjustments and changes within these areas. And to be able to create the platform, we wanted to use mostly Microsoft native tools. So we went with using Azure DevOps for our boards, pipelines, and repos. And another thing with the Microsoft native tools, we had a discussion on what kind of infrastructure as code language we wanted to use. So we went a bit back and forth between ARM, Terraform, and Bicep. And at that point of time, this was probably 12 months ago, Bicep wasn't mature enough to be able to create a platform like this. And with Terraform, we didn't have that much of experience. So we saw that we had to spend a good time on getting more hands-on experience with it. So we decided to start with ARM templates. And after a couple of months, we saw the rapidly development, the big improvements, and that there was a big Bicep community that worked behind Bicep, which basically made us more comfortable to transition to. And I also want to give a big shout out to the Bicep community here, because they've been doing a really good job with the past 12 months now. And as for today, we are 100% infrastructure as code, where all of our templates are written in Bicep, and we've been having good experience with that. And lastly, I want to mention that we wanted to deploy the platform to multiple tenants at the same time. So we weren't interested in having tenant-specific pipelines. So we want to use the same code base and the same pipelines to all of the tenants, which is what we're going to show you guys later on.
Awesome. So I'm sure the viewers see some similarities on those requirements. Matthew, can you talk a little bit more about why Sberbank One Alliance has 13 Azure Active Directory tenants? And as we know, it's recommended in the cloud adoption framework to have a single tenant. So why 13?
Yeah, it's a good question, Zach. And maybe as you can see from this slide, we've heard it before. But again, the answer goes back to what I said a while ago. We are not a giant corporation. We are a series, an alliance of separate legal entities, and they all have their own business requirements. They're competing banks in some instances, even. So when we started this ZEVS project in 2017, many of the banks ran their own analysis to find out what was best for them and for their business and their strategy. And in many cases, it was desirable for them to have control, maybe purely for compliance and governance, but also this was a whole suite of new technologies that they were going to roll out to their customers, internal customers, and platforms that they wanted to be close to. They wanted to have control. So, like I said, there's many different reasons for it. And from a purely technical perspective, it makes things difficult for us. It makes things a challenge. It's not easy. But after having worked so long with it, I think in every one of us who works technically, there's a tiny bit that kind of enjoys this challenge. And I think it'd be too easy with just the one tenant now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Erhan, do the banks have the same desire to manage and create the Azure platform themselves?
No, they don't, or most of them don't. And the reason for that is because they don't have the interest or the resources to create a platform on this level. And this is also not a core business for the banks. But I want to say that they do support their own Azure AD tenant. So that's something they do. And so these types of deliveries like standardized Azure platform, enterprise infrastructure are typical deliveries for Sparebanken Utvikling, where we have a unique position here as we serve the whole alliance. And with that, we are able to add value by managing the hybrid element and also the enterprise agreement.
We're quite a small team in Sparebanken Utvikling in Team Azure, but we have big ambitions. We believe that the alliance is best served if we build a center of excellence with us, because it's quite specialist knowledge, to be honest. And we have a lot of belief that that's going to be best for the alliance if that core knowledge is with us.
Yeah. So what infrastructure is shared between the banks and the other customers?
Yeah, so traditionally on-premise, quite a lot is shared. Many of the core banking systems are shared, and we have a series of data centers across the country, but they're all joined on the same network. So there's a large WAN that connects everything. So obviously, when we started moving to the cloud and having multiple tenants, we decided a long time ago, actually, that it's best that we have a hub, and we use our hub tenant and conceptually a hub that we control the hybrid elements there. So we have a firewall there, we have a DNS, we have all the routing and the internet connection there. So we sit in the middle and control the shared governance in a way, the hybrid governance there.
Okay, and that got kind of complex pretty fast there, right?
It is complex, yeah.
So how do you deploy across these multiple Azure AD tenants?
That's a really good question. And before we dive into the multi-tenant deployment step here, let's just take a quick look at the pipelines we're working with. As we can see here, we have divided them into 3 groups where we have the core pipelines. These are responsible for creating the core infrastructure, which is the identity, connectivity, and management part of our platform. And we have landing zone pipelines, which are responsible for creating, provisioning new landing zone, and also setting up the connectivity part where we peer the VNet within our landing zone to our hub. And lastly, we have the onboarding pipeline, which we use to prepare a tenant to consume our pipelines. And the reason I'm showing this is just to set a context on the amount of pipelines we're working with. So, and we aren't interested in creating 10 specific pipelines. As Matthew mentioned, we have 13 tenants plus a couple of companies. So that would be way too many pipelines to manage, and it doesn't scale well. So we can jump right into the multi-tenant deployment now. And we have to follow a onboarding prerequisite, which is a 2-step guide for us. And the tenant that we are onboarding needs to have a Azure AD Premium P2 license. And the reason for that is because we're using PIM for just-in-time access. So that's necessary from our side. So the first step within our prerequisite here is that we have a enrollment account that gets invited as a guest user to that tenant. And this enrollment account will be used to set up will be used for the initial setup, where we create the management group hierarchy. We're creating service principles for the rest of our pipelines, and doing a couple of other stuff for the preparation. And this enrollment account also needs some sort of role assignments because we're setting up the management group hierarchy. So we need to have owner rights on the tenant root level to be able to create service principles. You need to have application developers and so on. So that's the first step. And our second step is that we need to have a enterprise agreement service account from that tenant to be created. This will be used to create new subscriptions within the enterprise agreement portal. So we need to be able to authenticate to the EA portal as well with EA administrator. And we need to be able to authenticate to the Azure portal and also to the application Microsoft Azure PowerShell. And it should also not be blocked by any conditional access policies on the tenant level if there are any.
Okay. So Matthew, how do you collect all this information with new tenants, or as you scale for new customers or new banks? How do you get this information?
Yeah, well, it's quite important that we get the information we need to onboard successfully the tenant, but we also need to have an important dialogue between us, because we're selling a service to our internal customers, as we say. So what we do is we have a series of workshops. So we can go through the commercial aspects of our agreement, but also run through the operations, how they can contact us, what kind of SLAs we can deliver. So we have quite a number of things to go through, so that we get all the information that we need, but also that the bank customer, the customer who is a bank, gets all the information and the clarity that they need as well. And we do also a responsibility matrix run through as well, because if they steer the tenant and we do the platform, obviously there's shared responsibility there. So it's very important for us that we have a structured onboarding.
Yeah. And as Matthew said, we gather the information that we need because we use this within our first pipeline that we're running. So the first pipeline is the Eunomia onboarding. When we start it, we have to provide it with some parameters, which Matthew talked about. So we have the primary domain, we need to add the tenant ID, the company code, we have add the enterprise agreement account, enrollment account, and so on. So that's the information we need to provide our pipeline to be able to know which tenant we're going to. And the first thing it will create is a tenant-specific repository. This repository is really important for the rest of our pipelines because it contains a lot of information which our pipelines are dependent on. I'll be talking a bit more about them later on. But the following tasks are creating a variable group. It's creating the management group hierarchy for that tenant, creating service principals, Azure AD groups, and doing the PIM configuration. So when we're done with the Eunomia onboarding process here, we have a tenant with our management group hierarchy, which is ready to consume the rest of our pipelines now. And also, before we can start to run the rest of our pipelines, which is the core and landing zone pipelines, we have to do one last change here. Our pipelines are YAML based, so we are working with YAML file to simplify the deployments. And we have a YAML templates repository here, which contains a couple of YAML files. That's files that reference to different types of scripts and templates that our pipeline needs, which will be published as artifacts. But the most important file here is the prod stage tenants, which is the file where we define the stages that our pipelines needs to run through. So if we take a look at that one, we can see that we have defined the first stage, which is our hub tenant. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the only thing we need to do now to be able for our pipelines to be able to deploy to a new tenant is to add a new stage, which is the tenant that we just onboarded. So with that, our pipelines are now able to first deploy to our first stage, which is the hub tenant, Sparebank 1, and then deploy to the second stage, which is the spoke tenant that we just onboarded. And this is basically the way we deploy to multiple tenants with using the same code base and the same pipelines.
Yeah. So Erhan, when a customer or tenant wants to add a new policy, how does that work across the landscape that you have, the multiple tenants?
Yeah, that's also a good question here. And first of all, we don't want to create a tenant-specific policy here. We're interested in having a standardization. So we will take a look at the policy and see if that is a policy that we can implement for the platform. So when we create the policy definition and assignment, we will run the core 02 policy pipeline, and we'll go through the list of the stages that we have here, and we'll deploy that to all of the tenants.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not quite done here yet. And as I mentioned, we are creating a tenant-specific repository. This will contain a couple of files that our pipelines are working with. We have a file for IP groups, for firewall rules, for NSG rules, ASG rules, and so on. And I've listed two files here, which is the networking.json. This will contain the information about the VNet, the subnet, and the IP addresses that we allocated to them. So when we run the networking pipeline, it will go through the networking.json file here, and it will get the information and set up the connectivity between the landing zone and to our hub. But the most important file here is actually the base.json. If we take a quick look at that file, we can see that it contains the information we have about the tenant that we just onboarded. So we have the primary domain, the tenant ID, the enrollment account, the billing account, and so on. That's the way our pipeline knows which tenant it's going to. And we also have a section for features that we can enable and disable for that tenant. It's actually here where we define if that tenant is going to be our spoke tenant. And lastly, we have a section for landing zone and core. This is also a really interesting thing within our pipelines, because if the tenant that we just onboarded requests a new subscription or a new landing zone, the only thing we need to add within our base.json file here is 10 parameters. So we need to define the name of the subscription. We need to define the management group it should go under. We have some tags we need to define, what kind of workload we are creating, and group admins that will get access to the landing zone. So when we run the landing zone pipeline, it will go through the list of the stages, and we'll see that we added a new stage, which is the spoke tenant, and we'll find the base.json file and see that we created a new landing zone, and it will start creating the subscription, move it to the correct management group hierarchy. It will start registering the resource providers, setting up the defender, configuring the activity log export, creating the tags, setting up the budgeting, creating Azure AD groups, and doing the PIM configuration. So this is basically the way we are provisioning new landing zones. And now application teams can start creating their workloads. And everything within this process is programmatically created, so we don't need to do any manual steps here. And also I want to mention, we talked the other day about our pipelines, and you said something that was really interesting. You said that it reminded you of some sort of a landing zone vending machine, which is a really good way to put it, because it is actually a kind of a vending machine. We just provide it with 10 parameters and it will create the landing zone.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So how does Sberbank One communicate this across all the banks and customers, let alone the individual departments?
Yeah, so one of the things we realized quite early on in this development time was we need to inform our internal developer teams and our other internal colleagues how this platform works. So at the same time as we developed the platform, we developed our documentation site as well. So we've very much copied Microsoft here. So this is a static web app that runs in Azure, and we have a repo, which is where all the documentation files lie and are visualized via this website here. And in there you'll find architectural drawings, you'll find design decisions, you'll find getting started guides. We're going to create a guide for dummies. You know, what do I do first day on Azure? How do I start? So hopefully this will be everything any internal team will need in order to start building on the Eunomia platform.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the vending machines and things like that, right? But how do the end users request a new subscription?
Yeah, so again, this is quite complex because we have quite a lot of tenants and quite a lot of banks, and they all have their own routines, processes, desires. So all I can say now is that in the shared tenant, our main tenant that we control, what we've done is we have created a front end which is a simple form. And we then ask for the key information that we need, the 10 commandments, as we sometimes call it. We get that information we need, plus a few other things around compliance and risk analysis and so on. And then that gets automatically pumped into a SharePoint list with the use of Power Automate, which also then sends out notifications to the orderer and so on. And then we have the creation process that runs through after that. So we're not fully automated yet. But we are very much working towards that. That's our plan, to be completely automated. That from entering the form, wait 30 minutes and you get a landing zone. That's the plan.
Okay. So you're on this journey using Azure landing zones and streamlining deployments across multiple Azure AD tenants. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges you face and what learnings that brought you?
Yeah, of course. We had some challenges. And first of all, I want to mention that we had to understand the Azure landing zone concept here. And our starting point was that we had the assessment with Microsoft. And after that, we need to get some hands-on experience with Azure landing zone. So we went to the Azure landing zone GitHub repository, which is a open source repository. Yeah. And before I move on, I want to also give a shout out to the Azure landing zone team here. They've been doing a good job with the repository and been really helpful for us when we created some issues and responded really fast. That's at least my experience. And so what we did here was that we downloaded all the scripts and the components, and we divide them into the pipelines that we had, that I showed you, and we start making adjustments according to our needs for the platform that we wanted to create. So that was our starting point with Azure Landing Zone. And with that, we had discussions regarding the management group hierarchy that came up. And it was really important for us to have a management group hierarchy that worked really well, because we wanted to use a policy-driven governance model. So we needed to have a management group hierarchy that was designed in a way where we could easily assign policies to. And as we tried different approaches, we failed a couple of times, but as for today now, we have a management group hierarchy that works really well for us. And another thing that was a challenge was to organize our team. This isn't the only project that we were working with in Sparebanken Utvikling. We have our daily work, and we have to provide to help the banks out with their needs. So we need to have a way to organize all the work that we did. So we started using the DevOps methodology here, where we use Azure DevOps, as I mentioned, for our repositories, pipelines, and boards. So within that, we created all of our tasks. We have sprints. We are managing all of the work that we do. So with that, we're able to see how much work we have left, what we've done, and what we can move on with. And we also have daily stand-ups, sprint plannings, sprint reviews, which is really helpful for us to be able to know the amount of work we have to do here. And another thing was that another challenge we had was to be able to test the platform, because as Matthew said, we're working with 13 tenants, so we need to have a testing environment that could replicate that. So now we actually have 4 test tenants. We have a test hub tenant, we have 2 test spoke tenants, and 1 test on-premises tenant, which replicates the on-premises world. So these tenants are the pre-production environment for us. And when we create a new feature or we want to add a new policy, we deploy that to our pre-production environment, where all of the tenants will get that update. So we can go in and verify if the result is what we wanted. And if that's the case, we can deploy this to our production. So that was also really helpful for us when we designed our testing environment after a period of time here. And I also want to mention the pipeline setup we had. We tried different approaches here as well. And it was something we failed a couple of times, and we tried various types of approaches. And one of our architects did a really good job helping us out to design the pipeline setup for us. And as for today now, we are able to deploy this to multiple tenants without creating any tenant-specific pipelines that we talked about. And lastly, another big challenge or a pickle for us was that we had the issue with Privatelink or DNS, which was a big challenge that we had to solve.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because that's very interesting, right?
Yeah.
So we reached out to Microsoft Global Black Belt Mark DeDrug, who overlooked the design and assured us that what you guys were thinking is on the right path for what we had at the time in the services. So can you talk a little bit more about this design?
Yeah, so the DNS challenge we had deserves its own session, really. It's pretty intense, this area, and there's a lot to talk about here. But I'll try and give you a high level overview. So the problem is that we wanted to enable Privatelink for all our PaaS services as a default. Obviously, we have a way to go directly out to the internet with public services if we need that, but default was going to be Privatelink, so all the traffic comes inwards. And this is fine, but you need then a DNS zone to handle the record for the PaaS private endpoint. And this is fine if you have a single tenant, but when you multiply that, you have the problem that every single tenant has the same DNS zone, same suffix. So that if you're then sat on a shared on-premise environment and you need to do a lookup against one of these DNS zones, there's no logical way, certainly not with Microsoft native tools, to know which tenant you're going to be resolving against. So we realized at that point we were going to have to sit in the middle and provide that hybrid service, as I talked about, and have zones for all the different private link services that we control in the middle. We sit as the source of truth. But then we have the next problem, is that we don't want to sit there punching in DNS records all day long. We don't believe in doing things manually. We don't believe it, and we don't want to sit there as a bottleneck either. So we tried a few things. Again, we failed a few times, but again, finally, one of our guys in the team came up with a really cool solution. So what happens is we use the policy set from the GitHub repo for registering and deleting of pass records automatically via policy. We use that as a default point, but instead of writing back to the local tenant, it writes back across tenant to a central DNS zone. So all the tenants write across tenants to a central DNS zone. And the way we do that permission-wise is we use what we call reverse lighthouse, so that the spoke tenant has just enough rights to write that back to DNS. And then we get full lifecycle management across DNS, past DNS records, and full automation as well. So it's a brilliant solution, and we're very proud of that. Works great.
Nice. Yeah, that's very. Yeah, it's really good. So, are there any final key learnings that you like to add as well?
Yeah, well, we obviously learned a lot on the technical side along the way. We haven't mentioned half of it, but I think some of the things that we found very early on when we were working was conceptually there are a few things that everyone can learn from. So the first one we had was that we found early on we're never going to be finished with everything we want to do. We had a rough date we wanted to go into production, and in order to reach that we had to strip away a lot of stuff. So minimum viable product, what do we absolutely have to go into production, and start there. That will be more than enough, I promise. So begin there, and then also build iteratively upon that. So get into routines of having, like we said, the good DevOps practices, building iteratively, releasing new features often. That's what we're doing now, and it's definitely a huge benefit for us. You're always going to have a lot to do. You're never going to be finished with an Azure platform, so you need to get used to that state.
Yeah.
Also, fail fast, fail often. I think if you're not failing, then you're not trying hard enough, probably. We failed hundreds of times along the way. We've gone down a road and had to come back, but it means that you're trying and just try things out until you find the right solution. So that's important to accept that you're going to fail at some of these things. It's just how it is. Another thing we're learning now more than ever, now that we are in production, is think of your customers, listen to their feedback. We build a platform, but it's for them. We want to deliver an internal developer platform for our developer teams. So that feedback loop is essential. And I think once you're in production, you learn so much more than when you're on the drawing block. You can have discussions and have that discussion, but you'll never learn until you really start trying to do stuff. And then you hit all the policies, then you see where things need slightly adjusting. So that's really important as well. Have some teams very close to you that you can work closely with. And finally, it's back to the old KISS principle here. Keep it simple. Sounds ironic for us, maybe, because our platform is far from simple. But what I mean by that is strip away things you don't need. There's I don't know, 500 policies in the GitHub repo. You won't need them all. So don't implement policies if you don't need them. Make the management group structure as simple as possible. Cut away all the stuff you don't need. Try and streamline what you're doing. And as I've said here, if you can't keep it simple, then at least keep it standardized. So we've managed to we have like Erhan said, programmatically deployed resources. So you need to have a standard naming convention across the board, so that everything is foreseeable and that everything makes sense to developers and for us developing onward on the platform. So that's our key learnings, I'd say, from the last year.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Yeah. So should we
We just got one more slide there.
Yeah, should we see if there's any more questions as well?
Yeah,
from the audience. But you want to go over this slide here for a little bit?
Yeah, I can just say a few words on this. So we've got a couple of links there from Microsoft. There's the cloud adoption framework there. That's good read, and the repo for IaC architecture. And we've got a few links there for SpiderBank and Utvikling as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to quickly mention that they've been creating Azure landings on Bicep repository as well, which is something new, and that's also a great thing that we can use as a starting point here if you want to create your own platform.
Yeah. Okay. So I have some questions as well.
Okay.
Coming through.
Great.
Okay. So the first question I have here is there's 400 Azure policies. Are there policies as code? In that case, which framework for the code, presumably Bicep? Does that make sense?
Yeah, the policies we have created are created within ARM or JSON. So We've divided them into initiatives, so we add them to different types of branches here, and they're not transitioned over to Bicep yet. So all of the policies are created within JSON.
Okay.
Yeah.
And another one here is, how do you handle your sandbox accounts?
Yeah, that's a really good question here. We are working with a automation here because when we deliver a sandbox environment here, we want to be able to control we want to help out to the team to control their budgeting and the costs of the sandbox. So we want to create a automation here where we can cancel the sandbox environment if it goes over the budgeting limit that we have added. So, and with that, the team can still be able to get read access on their subscriptions, but they're not able to create any more resources. And if they want to still use the sandbox, they have to get in touch with us, and we can still give them access to the landing zone.
So you're keeping costs down with it,
Yeah,
but also you're allowing the developers to explore the new services and things like that. So that's really good, right?
Yeah, we have audit only policy for most things in the sandbox. So like you said, it's really important that if it's a new service or a team that's not completely comfortable with infrastructure as code, that they've got a place where they can play and get up to speed. Because if you're trying to go straight into a production landing zone with ALZ, it's pretty tight and it's pretty locked down. So you need to know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the only restriction within the sandbox is actually that we're not peering that to our hub. So that's the only landing zone which lives under its own branch. So you can do whatever you want, but you can peer that to our hub.
Yeah. So it's good to have policy driven governance.
Yeah.
It's good to have these guardrails in place, but it's also good to have, like we said, the sandbox where you can go and explore and really learn a service or how that service can go with your product that you're developing.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I have another one here as well. So Azure landing zones have constructs. So you have AKS, you have cloud analytics, there's SAP, there's these constructs. So how do you do that?
Yeah, so when we went into production, we didn't have any of these configured, back to that MVP concept. But one of the first customers we had asked for a Synapse instance, and that required Synapse Hub and so on. So we have now provisioned a separate subscription, which falls under the data management architecture, landing zone reference architecture. So we now have that in place, and this will be a per tenant configuration, if I remember correctly. So this will be there for all our customers in the shared tenant at the moment. But again, this will be something that we roll out to all our tenants. We want to make everything as standardized as possible. But again, going back to keeping it simple, the reference architecture there allows you to create a hub or an instance for Databricks and for loads of other different data analytics services. And we didn't need that. We just needed Synapse. So all we've done is provided the Synapse infrastructure there. And if there comes a time when someone else orders more, then we'll add that eventually when the time comes.
Okay. And so the last question I have here as well is, what's the plan going forward? Very open-ended question, but
You want to start?
Yeah, the plan for the future development is that, first of all, we are working with providing self-hosted build agents for the application team, as we have a private management group branch where we don't allow public access. So we are not able to use the Microsoft DevOps agents. So with that, we're working with providing the a separate self-hosted build agents for the application teams, and as well as the automation regarding the sandbox environment that we talked about. And we have some stuff that we need to work around the policies that we go through. And there are a couple of more things that in our pipeline as well.
Yeah, we're going to look at the developer experience also, maybe look at DevBox or something like that to make it even easier for developers. Yeah, we've got tons of stuff on the backlog, which is good and bad. So we've got enough to keep us busy. But mainly right now we're focusing on the customers we have and onboarding the other customers that are not currently onboarded and helping migrate systems over. So yeah, we've got enough to do.
It's a great future plan, and Azure Landing Zone has helped you guys enable this future growth as well. Gives you that structure, gives you, like we said 100 times already, policy-driven guardrails. It allows you to really, scale.
Yeah.
It's Azure multi-tenancy at scale.
That's what
Right.
it is. Yeah, that's the key. Yeah, we've now got a platform that is scalable, flexible, and future-proof. And we didn't have that before.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else top of mind you guys want to bring up?
I don't think so. I can just say thank you for the invitation to present at Microsoft Ignite. It's been an honor, and it's been fun working with you, not least over the last year or so. So I look forward to good collaboration.
Yeah, let's keep it up. Let's keep it
Yeah.
up, right?
Thank you for having
Awesome.
us.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.